I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, my country did not participate in the vote on this draft resolution for the renewal of the United Nations mission for the organization of a referendum in Western Sahara. Through that absence, and acting fully responsibly, Algeria wanted to illustrate the distance that we put between ourselves and a text which does not faithfully reflect, does not sufficiently reflect the UN doctrine with regard to decolonization. It's the implementation of that doctrine that has made it possible for a number of countries to be represented here amongst us in the United Nations organization. Do we need to even recall this? The final decision on the future cannot, must not belong to anyone other than the people under colonial domination. And in that regard, allow me to quote here President Woodrow Wilson of the United States of America, who stated, and I'll quote this in English,
Peoples are not to be handed about from one sovereignty to another by an international conference or an understanding between rivals and antagonists. National aspiration must be respected. Peoples may now be dominated and governed only by their own consent. Self-determination is not a mere phrase. It is an imperative principle of action. Je vous invite tous.
I would invite you all of you, to think deeply about what was said in that statement. Mr. President, as a neighboring country of the main actors in Western Sahara, Algeria has engaged in good faith and in a constructive spirit in the negotiation of the text that was put forward. And I'd like here, at this meeting, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the penholder, the United States, who, contrary to what happened last year, spared no effort to improve the text and to find a compromise between the parties involved. A compromise which would have been able to bring together all of the members of the Council. Of course. And we recognize this openly. Substantial improvements were made to the initial text. First of all, by recalling the fundamental parameters of a just and lasting solution to the conflict in Western Sahara. And then, enshrining the inalienable right of the people of Western Sahara to self-determination. And finally, by engaging the two parties, the Kingdom of Morocco and the Polisario Front, in good faith negotiations without preconditions under the aegis of the United Nations. But unfortunately, the text which was finally submitted still has a number of shortcomings. It is below, I say, the expectations and the legitimate aspirations of the people of Western Sahara, represented by the Polisario Front. This people who, for more than 50 years, have resisted in order to have their own say in their own future. So what is lacking in this text? Although the goal is commonly shared, namely to find a lasting, just and mutually acceptable solution that would provide the right to the people of Western Sahara to self-determination, the way in which this achieved, let me underscore, the way in which this is to be achieved raises legitimate questions. The complicated framework for the proposed negotiation, which puts one option ahead of others, prevents creativity and the flexibility that are necessary to be deployed in order to reach an agreement freely entered into in accordance with the United Nations doctrine in matters of decolonization. Moreover, this text creates an imbalance between the two parties to the conflict by stressing simply the territorial ambitions of one party and saying nothing about the aspirations of the other party, that party being the Sahrawi people who are demanding their freedom. The proof of this is that this text ignores the proposals of the Polisario Front, which nevertheless were recently passed on to the United Nations Secretary General and to the Security Council, and which were published under document number S/2025/664. They are a party to the conflict, and their opinion must be heard, if not taken into consideration. Finally, this text raises, and here I really want you to tune into what I'm saying, this text raises legal questions, serious, legitimate questions with regard to the legal foundation for the negotiating framework being proposed in order to resolve the Western Saharan conflict. Just think for a moment that this framework were to be reproduced, replicated in other conflict zones, in Europe, in the Americas, in Asia, in Africa. And it is one of the main, and if it were to be one of the main pillars of the international order that were to be dangerously divided. Mr. President, we certainly did need to have a final effort, an effort both necessary and important, but with greater flexibility, creativity and diplomacy, if we were to have arrived at a successful outcome to the negotiation of this resolution. This situation would have made it possible to launch in short order a dynamic political process on a solid foundation by including all stakeholders, all parties involved, with the final goal of once and for all the decolonization of Western Sahara according to the United Nations Charter. I deplore the fact that the penholder, despite all their efforts, were not able to overcome resistance, and you all know what resistance that is, in order to make the changes necessary and make the text acceptable to everyone. We missed a chance here, and we regret this. And we regret that President Trump's initiative to bring peace and détente to our region, an initiative which raised hope and interest, an initiative that is not able to properly get off the ground with the active support of all parties involved. Indeed, this resolution does not, well, still not, create the necessary momentum and conditions for it to be successful. A success where everyone is a winner. A success that does not leave any winner or loser. To conclude, Mr. President, a just and lasting solution can only come about in the presence of the respect for the inalienable right of the people of Western Sahara to decide on their own future. This is the only guarantee of genuine peace and of lasting stability in the region. And Algeria, in a way we have proceeded, and I'd like to reaffirm it here, and please all be my witness. Algeria remains faithful to the principle of the Pacific settlement of disputes. We remain faithful to the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. Algeria will always be ready, let me repeat that, will always be ready to commit in full sovereignty, responsibly, and demonstrating creativity, will always be ready for any negotiation which will scrupulously respect the cardinal principles of equity, impartiality, and justice. Justice, with a view to a lasting solution to the question of Western Sahara. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for his statement.